Hi everyone. I wanted to make a response video to my friend Matthew Street's video, and I'm going to try to remember to put a link below here so you can check out his original video for yourself. This is a video response about Paul McCartney's singing voice that's kind of been showing signs of age naturally, since the man is going to turn 76 years old next month. And in Matthew Street's video, he began by saying that there was somebody in the vinyl community. He didn't want to say who, he didn't want to name who the person was, and I can respect that. That had made a comment that he doesn't listen to Paul's music after the 80s, the early 80s, I think, mostly, because he just can't really take Paul's voice deteriorating. And there's not really that much that I can add to Matthew's video because I kind of agreed just about word for word with everything Matt said, and the video kind of speaks for me as well as for him. But I thought I would just, do a response here. He asked me if I'd be interested in doing a reply, so I will. And just like Matthew said, the first time that I ever had any inkling that I thought Paul McCartney's voice sounded a little bit out of shape or a little worn or rough was in 1979, near the end of 79 especially, when he did the concert for Campuchia. And he did songs like Gotta Get You Into My Life and the McCartney album song called Every Night. And there was a hoarseness, a throatiness. Now I'm not sure if this is the case or not, but I think Paul McCartney still smoked in those days. That could be part of it. That's a little detail that I don't think Matt mentioned in his video. But I remember for the first time thinking, wow, Paul's voice sounds kind of like rough, kind of hoarse. And, back then I was only 17 years old myself, and Paul was only 37. But back then, when you're 17, you think 37 is old, right? And I remember there was a Beatles call-in radio show. And in the radio show, one of the callers called live and said, I heard the Campuchia concert, and the guy was saying, if the Beatles are going to have a reunion, they better do it fast before McCartney's voice gets like this. I remember him saying that, and I thought, I remember like it was only yesterday. I recall that. So that's how we thought back then. But of course, Paul's voice wasn't anywhere near gone back in '79, and he would go on to do great stuff like the Tug of War album in 1982 and so on. So he was just probably, smoking too much, or just maybe doing too much live stuff and taxing his throat. But the thing is, we all know, let's face it, that Paul's voice has kind of deteriorated in recent times, in a couple of decades. And that's not a knock against Paul. That's just the natural regression that comes with age, just the way it's going to be. And I notice it more in Paul's speaking voice. Paul has more of a hoarse kind of speaking voice. But I think he's really not doing himself any favors by doing so many tours. I mean, of course, us fans, let's face it, we're spoiled in a good way by Paul always going out there on the road. So many new people who are young that never had a chance to see Paul before are getting a chance. And even some older people who've never gone to a Paul concert are always getting new chances to see Paul on the road. And that's a fantastic thing that he does it. But at the same time, at what cost to his voice and his vocal apparatus, And a lot of people think he should take the songs down a notch in a key when he does live performances, and I agree. My girlfriend, who is a trained singer, says that he should really try to take them down, but he doesn't want to do that. He wants to sing them the regular way, and as a result, he strains at times. But my experience with Paul has always been that there were times, we're going to say in the past, 15 years or so, something like that, 15 to 20 years or something, give or take, where I've heard him sing on television shows, performances. I heard him doing live concerts. I've gone to shows, and there's times when I think, wow, this guy really is amazing. I can't believe at his age that he still can do it. And then there's other times where I kind of cringe and I say, oh my, I remember him being on, I think, the Queen's Jubilee, and I think he had a kind of rough performance. And we all remember what I think goes down in history, maybe as the worst performance of Paul's career vocally. That's when he did the song Maybe I'm Amazed, a song that Paul really needs to dropped from his repertoire, I'm afraid now. On a Saturday Night Live, I think it was the 40th anniversary special. I think that's what it was in 2015. But then if you find out some details and research, you discover that he had given another concert less than 24 hours before in New York, I think, New York City, before he did that. I forget where exactly it was, but he had already been taxing his voice earlier, not even 24 hours, less than 24 hours before the Saturday Night Live appearance. So that explains some of it. But I remember going to see him in, say, 2005 at Madison Square Garden in New York and coming out and saying, wow, this guy is amazing. I think he can do it for another 10 years. This guy's incredible. And then I remember seeing him in, say, 2011 again, and at Yankee Stadium. And went with my young nephew, and I said, yeah, he's still able to do it. I can't believe it. And I saw him just last year in 2017 again, and I came out. It was the first time where I thought that although he still can pull it off, he seemed a little, to me on this particular venue, seemed a little more, I'm going to use the word tired. He seemed a little tired, I thought. But yet, he's still pulling it off. That's the whole thing. It's amazing that even though he has these times where he can't really reach certain notes, and he has a struggle, and you're sitting there in the audience sometimes on an edge hoping he doesn't crack or something, I still think, all things considered, he has not completely embarrassed himself or anything like that. I think it's still worth seeing Paul. And if you've never seen Paul, please hurry up. A lot of people tell me in my comments, they say, I've never seen Paul. I should see him. Or, see him. What are you waiting for? The man's going to be 76 years old. Do it. Personally, I wish that he would just think about stopping actual live performing for a while, maybe forever, I don't know. But what I mean is save his voice to put out albums. And that's what I want to talk about here a little bit, the albums, some of them. Now, what's interesting is this person, whoever it was, who said that he doesn't really care to listen to Paul after the early 80s or whatever. That's when he stopped. He's missing some really good stuff, I think. Now, if you don't like somebody's voice, if you don't like somebody's singing technique, that's your prerogative. And of course, it's your decision. Everybody can do what they want to do. Let's get that straight. That's one thing I want to tell Matthew Street also. Like I said, it's a matter of aesthetic taste or subjective feeling and opinion. If you just don't like the sound of somebody's voice, you don't want to hear his new stuff. Take Bob Dylan, for example. Bob Dylan's voice has always gone downhill. And, recent albums, his voice has been pretty bad. But yet at the same time with Bob Dylan, as bad as his voice has gotten, some of his best stuff has come out in albums like Tempest, Love and Theft. They say, I haven't heard Love and Theft, but I always hear it. I do have Tempest, though, that I mentioned. I love Tempest. I think it's a very good album from 2012. But Love and Theft was a big hit. Time Out of Mind was a fairly recent album of the last 20 years or so. That was a big hit. So, and it made #1 some of these albums. So the thing I'm saying is, the material is still good, is what I'm trying to say. Now, when it comes to Paul's albums, and I've taken the CDs out, it's just easier to get the CDs rather than the vinyl over here. In 1997, this is Flaming Pie. Flaming Pie is one of Paul's very best albums that he ever did. It out of 20 some odd albums that Paul's released as a solo artist, this is in my top 5. This is in my top 5. Okay, so he's got some of his best songs ever here. Songs that the Beatles would have been proud to record along with Paul. This is Run Devil Run from 1999. Paul is an amazing, heavily intense rock and roll form here. His voice sounds like, the way I always describe this album, sounds like Paul is in Hamburg, Germany, like 1961 or something. He sounds like he's like 19 or 20 years old. This is Driving Rain. This is Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. Now, a lot of Paul fans think this is among his best albums of all time as well. This is in a lot of people's top 5s. It's in my top, maybe if not the top 5, it's in the top 7 or 8 out of 20 albums. This is an album where the material on here is a lot more somber than usual, a lot more personal, a lot more vulnerable. I always call this Paul's John Lennon Plastic Ono Band album. It's the closest he comes to being revealing and very like hurt or very emotional. And probably the producer Nigel Godrich is partly responsible for getting that out of Paul. But you're going to deny yourself this album? This is some of the best songs McCartney ever did on this particular album, Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. It's just been reissued on vinyl, the affordable priced vinyl if you want to get it. Why deny yourself that? I mean, I see, what I'm trying to say is, and I was starting to say before, if somebody doesn't like the sound of somebody's voice, I kind of went off track with this. If somebody doesn't like somebody's voice and doesn't want to listen to the music, that's their prerogative and they don't have to. But I'm just saying, I think, I mean, if you don't like a sound, why are you going to subject yourself to it? But be a little more open-minded to the sounds of really good songs sung by a man who's aging and he has kind of like, I don't know, the wisdom of the ages, if you will. Like he's kind of like grown into his old man voice. Here's another album from Paul that I think is one of his best albums too, 2007, Memory Almost Full. He's got some good stuff on here. There's a song, House of Wax. Paul's about 65 or so when he did this album, 64, 65. And he sings a song here called House of Wax that is among his very best vocals that he ever did. He reaches new heights vocally that you will not believe if you don't hear it, but you're depriving yourself of that treat if you're going to just say, he didn't do anything good after the early 80s. Then you get Kisses on the Bottom. Now, his voice is kind of rough on this album, but in all fairness, this is an album where Paul is singing old American songbook standards. So, because they're old, I think it kind of accentuates it. Sometimes a situation where a person's voice is older and a little bit more rasped, a little bit more, as I said, I don't know, affected by the ages and ravages of time, kind of fit this. I mean, do you want to hear somebody like 19, 20 years old singing It's Only a Paper Moon? Do you want to hear them singing stuff like The Glory of Love? I mean, Paul's voice here suits these songs. And I'm going to get into one final point about that with this album. This is Paul's most recent album as of this date. This came out 5 years ago, I can't believe it, in 2013, and it's his album that was called New at the time. And to me, this makes the top 5 of all Paul's 20-some-odd solo albums. Now think about that. I mean, here's a man whose voice is feeling the ravages of age, showing the ravages of age, and yet I still consider some of these albums are Paul's very best of his career, even beating albums when he was like in his 30s. So what does that tell you? That although his voice is showing signs of wear, it sometimes can complement or accentuate some of the songs, and that's the case that I'm going to leave us with here on this particular album with a song called Early Days. There's a song here where Paul is basically singing about the early memories of him and John Lennon going around with their music, with their guitars slung across their shoulders, and the hair greased back with gasoline, Vaseline, and they're going to basic locations trying to get anybody to listen to their music and kind of beginning their craft. But when Paul sings this song, he has kind of a slightly croaky, raspy, old, I want to say the word geezer type of voice, and to me, it perfectly suits this song, Early Days, because he's talking about the old days, and he's a wizened old man by this time. I mean, singing about them old days when we used to go out together. Why do you want somebody like that sounds like Art Garfunkel of like 19 years old or something, sweet sounding like a sweet bird, to sing about old creaky memories? Why do you want that? It doesn't fit the song very well. Well, anyway, at the end of the day, we got to say to each his own. And, as I say, if somebody's not going to enjoy the sound of something, I can understand why they would not want to subject themselves to it. But I think in the case of Paul McCartney, you're really missing out on some good stuff here. And some of the best stuff of Paul's entire career, certainly his solo career. And he's really been on a stride the last, I want to say, 20, 21 years. And I didn't even talk about Electric Arguments by the Firemen, which is considered a good album. And, that's from 2008. So I just wanted to respond to Matt's video and consider what we're saying. And check out Matthew Smith. Sorry, I get them mixed up. Matthew Smith and Matthew Street. Guys, one of you's got to change your name. Okay, Matthew Street. Check out Matthew Street's video on this, the original one. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.